a good hand towel should work. And sorry.
Yes.
And then,
Have my
and
towel.
that's it. Yeah.
No spilling, no spilling necessary.
Oh yeah, especially around electronics. You don't want to mess that around. No.
Awesome.
All right, so that's what we're doing today. I have my, do I have host capabilities?
No, I'm still drinking coffee.
I hear you. What's that?
All right, now you should have all the capabilities.
All the capabilities. Let me find my Zoom. There we go. So then I am going to share my screen, not my Facebook screen. Hold on one second. Where am I stuff? Hold on. And is anybody can you see when people are watching this on Facebook?
I do. I have it on my phone. I am multi-teching today.
All right. Excellent. Here we go. Where is there we go. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see where I am? Awesome. So we're going to talk about acceptance and commitment therapy today. So hi, my name is Gemma Callahan. I am a special education teacher. I'm also a graduate student. Jenny is my supervising BCBA, finishing up my practicum hours. But I work in a self-contained classroom for kids with emotional behavior disorders, and I am using ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. So that's currently why we're talking about this, because I've been working on it. So acceptance and commitment therapy is also called acceptance and commitment training. There actually is, I've noticed in the literature, there's been a big push to kind of, because it is a therapeutic approach, but I think what I've seen is there's a movement to get it towards thinking about it as training, in the same way that I know I've done a couch to 5K training program a few years ago. I probably need to do one again, but that's a program. It's a protocol. It's you start and you do it. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they're trying to make that shift. And I think it's a really good shift for us behavior analysts. So our objective today is to learn a little bit about some specific facts about acceptance and commitment therapy, and to practice as a client would. So we're going to go through 3 lessons today and see what they bring up, and experience them as our learners would experience them a little bit, and figure out if this is something that you can learn from and something that you can use in your practice. So what is ACT? Acceptance and commitment therapy is based on relational frame theory. It was basically, I would say discovered, because I think it's based on scientific truth and scientific principles. Stephen Hayes kind of developed, if you will, or identified relational frame theory. It's a textual theory of psychology that we build our relativity, our cognition, by relating everything to everything else. And it focuses specifically on the behavior as a behavior analytic theory. It focuses on the behavior of internal events, private events, which as a radical behavior analyst is the most interesting part of it for me. A lot of times when people first start to study acceptance and commitment training, they're like, wait, this is ABA? It absolutely is ABA, because we're teaching skills, we're building skills so that our learners, our clients, our students can stay in the game, build agency, and the overall goal is psychological flexibility. The studies have proven that being able to be psychologically flexible is probably the most important skill that you can have for your mental health for your entire life. So the problem with ACT is that it's kind of dense. So we're going to talk about some stuff, then we're going to experience some stuff, and then we'll talk about this stuff some more. So you'll hear this, the Hexaflex in ACT. There are 6 components of the Hexaflex: present moment, committed action, values, acceptance, self as context, and diffusion. And I'm going to define those as we go through, but just know that they are there. The lessons that we will do, we focus on these components of the Hexaflex, And then I'm actually even going to we're going to talk about this in a little more in depth towards the end, but just these are there. They are what ACT is based on. So as I mentioned before, I am a self-contained classroom teacher for students with emotional behavior disorders. They have a lot of skills that they need to build. And the problem is, how do you teach all these skills? And one of the things I love about ACT is that it's a very systematic, behaviorally analytic approach to building these skills. So they struggle with response inhibition, resilience, staying on task, time management, effective self-advocacy. They struggle, you name it, they struggle it. So one of the first things that we work on is acceptance. And because, as you know, if you're a teacher or if you're even a behavior therapist, experiential avoidance is a thing. And our students love to avoid doing, and quite frankly, I do the same thing. I avoid doing things that are hard. I'm a little bit more competent at building that resilience than some of my clients or my students, but I struggle with it as well. So we're going to work on acceptance today. So hopefully, lesson number 1. So let me take a quick hot minute. So all of these lessons are from this book, which is called ACT for children with autism and emotional challenges. It's by Dr. Mark Dixon. I have a reference list at the end of this presentation, so you can go, so relax, you can go through and click all, and I'll share it. And on the Facebook page, I'll share this presentation so that you can access all of these links. So there are 180 lessons. He calls them days. Not coincidentally, there are 180 days in a school year. But the first one we're going to work on is this one, which is why you need your bowl of ice water. So let me tell you, as a teacher and as a therapist, let me talk you through, and then we'll do the activity. We're not going to do the first page of this activity. We're going to do the second page. But let me show you what it is, and we'll go through the components. So you see the little Hexaflex in the upper right-hand corner. I don't know if you see my little cursor. You do. Awesome. So that tells you what skill you're going to be working on. So you would go through the first page, and as I'll scroll down, you'll see it's differentiated by age or grades. So you've got your lower grades, your intermediate grades, and your middle and high school grades. So this first activity for practicing acceptance is being willingly out of breath. How long can you hold your breath for? These lessons are designed to be done in a classroom setting, small group setting, one-on-one setting. I don't think I'm violating anything. I do these one-on-one with my students because I have a very small number of students, and that's just kind of how I'm doing it for my work. But as you can see, you could totally do this in a classroom full of probably a bunch of kids, depending on how much instructional control you have. But so the first lesson, the first part of the lesson, you would have them hold their breath. Notice what it feels like when you hold your breath, what kinds of thoughts come up, what kind of feelings and emotions you're experiencing, but specifically what kind of thoughts do you have? And they specifically talk about in this, notice any thoughts and thank your mind for them without being controlled by them, even those sneaky thoughts. And you would read through this and talk about it and discuss it. You'd have every one of your students could have their own copy of this, so they would write this down. I held my breath for this many seconds, and then you talk about that for a second. Did you guys have any sneaky thoughts? How did you experience that? See if you can do it any longer this time. And then you'd see how they were able to willingly hold their breath. So you can see how that would start to kind of bring in that, okay, this is kind of interesting. How do you willingly do something that becomes hard? So then we're going to up the ante for our second part of this lesson. This is where the ice water comes in. So we're going to try the same technique that we did with holding our breath, but this time we're going to put our hand in the ice water. So you've got your hand, and you could do this with a big bucket of water in a classroom. So you could have several of these around your classroom and have the kids hold their hand in the ice water. We're going to do this today. So go ahead, get your ice water. You got everything ready. All right, I am going to start our timer from 0. I'll hold it up to the screen, and let's see how long you can hold your bucket of ice water. You ready? Oh, there she goes. Here we go. So go ahead and put your hand in. I know it's cold. And just kind of see and think about one of the things we do in acceptance and commitment training is we notice our thoughts. That's the self context, the noticing you. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So what kind of thoughts and feelings do you have? How are you thinking about this?
It's
It's
cold and I
early.
hate it.
It is cold, and
You know,
I
I don't
was
like
gonna.
to be cold.
I should have brought my ice water up. I should have done it, but I'll be honest with you, I've spilled so many things recently. I'm worried.
So I'm holding mine. It's not even on the desk.
All right. Don't have to push yourself too hard. There's always
Okay,
going to be one
I'm
or two.
good. What is that? 53 seconds?
53 seconds. That's a good amount of time.
My little pinky's turning numb.
All right. So now that you've done that, so you did it for 53 seconds. All right. So what strategies did you use to hang in there? Well, you and I were talking, right? That was definitely a strategy. We were talking about it. We were talking about how cold it was.
A little breathing.
Oh yeah, you were breathing. You were kind of trying to contact the present moment. And you probably were contacting the present moment because you probably have good skills with that. That's definitely a strategy that you do. You just experience it. All
I
right.
also looked at that timer and was
Yeah, you're
just go,
fixated on
one
the
more
time.
second, one more second. I'm like, no more seconds.
Absolutely. And that's a pretty good, and that's what I do when I exercise.
Yep.
I don't know, sometimes it's self-limiting, but absolutely. All right. So we are going to try this again, but before we do it, we are going to we are going to say the words, it's going to be very, very cold. It's going to be very, very cold. And we're going to do that for 1 minute. So I'm going to set our timer for 1 minute. Are you ready? We're going to do it together.
Ready. Yep.
It's going to be
very, very cold. It's going to be
very, very cold. It's going to be cold.
Very, very cold.
It's going to be cold. We're going to put our hands in.
Very cold. It's going to be very, very cold.
Going to be cold.
It's going to be very cold. It's going to be very cold.
It's going to be very cold. It is going to be cold.
It's going to be cold. It's going to be very cold.
It's going to be cold.
It's going to be cold. It's going to be very cold. It's going to be cold.
It's going to be cold.
It's going to be very cold. Very cold. It's going to be very cold.
Be cold.
It's going to be very cold.
It's going to be cold. We're about halfway there.
It's going to be very cold. Very cold, very cold, very cold, very cold.
Very, very,
it's going to be very cold. It's going to
feels like what I do when I am walking up.
Very cold.
Very cold January morning. Very, very cold. It's going to be cold.
It is going to be very, very cold. It's going to be cold. It's going to be very cold. It's going to be very, very cold. Very cold. It's going to be cold. It's going to be very cold.
It's going to be cold. It's going to be cold.
It's going to be cold.
Very cold. All right. So now we're going to stick our hand in the water. We're going to put our hands in. All right, you ready? Yep. And whoop, 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 whoop. Here we go. We are counting up. Go for it. Go for it. You're good.
It's cold.
Maybe that's the point.
What's the point?
The point is if we talk about it too much, maybe it makes it colder.
Maybe it makes it colder.
Sure. All right, we're 20. Yeah, because it does it backwards. Is there a way I can make it so my screen isn't reversed? Or do you see it as?
It's correct for me.
Oh, good. All right, good.
Zoom is magical.
So how does it feel this time?
It's cold. I think it's colder. I did switch hands because when we did this the other day, I felt my hand being partially numb already helped me do it longer. Right? So this time I switched hands. No, it's cold.
It's cold. It is pretty cold. And I'm wondering if, well, let's see, the magic of science. How are you doing?
I'm okay.
Do you want to be, are you good?
I mean, it's very cold.
It's very cold.
It's very cold. Okay, but I can be done.
You can be done. All right, you made it to 1 minute 17 seconds.
Oh, hey!
You made it hard. You did make it further. It occurs to me. So you made it longer this time around. Mm-hmm. What other strategies? So think about, I had this epiphany because when we did this before, it was harder to do it the second time. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if our efforts at diffusion didn't pan out as much. And maybe it was I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
Because I
Almost like it
noticed
drew attention to the being cold.
huh,
I wonder if we said, I'm going to be okay.
I'm gonna
I'm
be
going
okay.
to be
I
okay.
can do this.
I can do this, right? Some of that more positive
It just
self-talk.
makes it was something, it's something. So, but so that's something you could do. I noticed that you can usually just with pure stick to itiveness, you can go harder. But I also wondered because I have not done this one with my guys yet, but I'm also very curious if that it's going to be very cold is not as productive as you can do this. You can do,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But but either way, it's a really interesting lesson and
Mhm.
it's an interesting twist on willingness. So you start with holding your breath and then you actually do like an aversive activity, sticking
Yeah.
your hand in cold water.
Yeah.
Unless it's 100 degrees outside, that doesn't feel good. And how do you do that? How do you stick it in there a little longer? How do you keep it in there? So that's a really cool activity to do. It's a cool experience. Um, and again, we did it in what, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Now, if you did all of it, it might be a little bit longer if you do the holding of the breath, depending on how many students that you have it to. But it's a pretty cool lesson. And it's an interesting twist on um, building resilience. What does building resilience look like? And again, what's awesome as a teacher when you do these activities with your students, or if you're a therapist, once you've experienced this, then of course, when you're going forward with other lessons, you can now refer back to it, which is what makes ACT so powerful. So let's do another one. So this one is getting rid of our thoughts. So let me share I've got this lesson up. So again, so you can see in the corner, this is about diffusion. So let's talk about diffusion a tiny little bit. Diffusion is the skill of letting go of your thoughts.
Mhm.
It is, you are not your thoughts. And this is something that kids in particular, you could understand how students and young learners would have a difficulty
Mhm.
understanding because their experience up to this point, they are their thoughts, right? You have a thought and it's got to be true, right? Mom says it's true, teacher says it's true. So let's talk about this. So what happens when you don't want to have an upsetting thought? Sometimes when you're not willing to experience something, you do. So let's play a game to see if we can get rid of our thoughts. See if you can imagine a bright purple airplane. So think about that. What does a bright purple airplane look like? So we're going to do this activity, but first we're going to go through. We're going to say for 3 minutes, try as hard as you can to not think about the purple airplane.
That big purple jet airplane sitting on the tarmac, glowing in
Absolutely.
purple, that one I'm not supposed to think about? Okay.
Absolutely. The one that you've been thinking about, that's what you're not thinking about. But let's ask a question. So, did you think about a purple airplane at all last week?
Last
Probably
week?
not.
No.
Well, actually, you and I did because we did this activity. But I mean,
But even outside of us talking about it for those 5 minutes, I didn't think about it at all.
you didn't think
Right.
about it. So let's try, and you haven't really thought much about it up to now. So now what I'm going to do, again, in the interest of time, we're going to do it for a minute. I want you to actively not think about the purple airplane. And again, in a class, you probably would want to do it for 3 minutes. Um, because in my experience, 3 minutes it's a good long time.
Mhm.
And but again, if you've got a small group, it's much easier to do one-on-one. Big group, again, you really got to make sure you've got your instructional control in place because this could go crazy really quickly. All right. Hmm. All right. Okay, so let's take a looky-see. So we just did it for a minute. How many times did you think about the purple air? I thought about it at least 3, and I was actively looking at different things. What about you?
No, like 100, right? I have trees outside my window. I'm like, oh, look at the big tree. And in my mind, I could see the plane behind the tree. And I'm like, look at my clock and the plane. Look at my little poster over here and the plane. Look at my bowl of ice water. And I'm like, plane, go away.
Yes.
And then I saw you close your eyes and I was like, oh, let me try that. And I'm like, plane, big plane, movie screen plane. Okay, wow, that was kind of intense. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to contact present moment, and I actually was looking at other things, and I did kind of let it go. But then we're sitting here and I'm holding the timer, and immediately it was like, oh
It
yeah,
comes
I'm not
right
supposed to be
back.
thinking about that darn plane.
Comes right back.
So we thought about that plane a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard to not think about something.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? So this is the second part of activity. I want you to write down a word or a thought of something that you do not like to think about. Like
Don't like
monsters, someone, maybe a bully, someone who's mean to you. Maybe, I don't know. I know what I'm writing down.
it's gonna be cold.
It's gonna be cold. And again, in a classroom setting, every student would have this. I actually I have a workbook. So I want my guys to have this at the end of our month together, because we're working on this every day. I want them to take this home, and I want them to have, I don't know if they will, but they might. So that's definitely something you can have too. So now write down, how do you usually get rid of that thought in your head? Do you try to get rid of it?
The one that I just wrote down?
Yeah.
How do I get rid of it? I say it's going to be okay.
It's
We're
going to
back
be
to
okay.
acceptance.
And that's why it's a Hexaflex.
Yes.
Because in me, I actually, and I'll share this with you guys. I have my big capstone project. I don't like thinking about all the work I have left to do. And because I've got a lot, I got a lot to do. And that sometimes it's really hard for me. So what I do is I take a breath and I find present moment, and I realize I have committed actions. I have time. I am going to be able to get it done. And then, it's okay. So, but if you had an intrusive thought that maybe you couldn't control and you didn't have agency, what could you do? You could think about something else. You could think about how, if it's a problem, you could think about how you were looking to solve that problem. You could practice acceptance. One of the techniques that a lot of times things that worry us are things that we can't control, or maybe they're things that we do have to practice acceptance on. So in this particular activity would be saying to yourself, whatever that thing is, 5 times fast, 5 times slow, 5 times really slow, and then thinking, does that thought or word seem as bad anymore? In my experience, a lot of times kids think about things like they worry about talking in class, they worry about getting in trouble, they worry about things that a lot of times they worry about, they worry about getting in trouble, or they worry about maybe it's being late or something like that. They worry about things that they can sometimes control, but sometimes can't. So it's interesting. I've seen them when they do this. So let's think about this 5 times fast. So I'm going to say my thing.
So the word that we're saying 5 times fast, is that what we're worrying about, or what we're replacing?
What you wrote down, whatever you wrote down.
That's my worry.
That's, yes, whatever you wrote down is what you could say. And if you don't want to share it, maybe share something else, but because that could be, and this is one of those things, again, remember how I said that? You have to think about what's appropriate to share with your kiddos, because you're modeling these kids. You're modeling.
There's too much to do.
Pardon?
There's too much to do. There's too much to get done.
This is not easy stuff. So, but it's okay that, so I'm going to do my phrase is capstone project, because that's it. So I'm going to say that 5 times. So you're going to say it regular time. So capstone project.
Too much to do. There's too much to do. There's too much to do. There's too much to do. Too much to do.
Now you're going to say it 5 times. You're going to say it fast. Don't project.
There's too much to do. There's
Don't
too much to
project.
do. There's too much to do. There's too much to
Don't
do.
project.
Too much to
Count,
do.
count fast. Can I say capstone? Now we're going to say it slow.
There's too
Capstone.
much to do. There's too much to do. There's too much to do. There is too much to do. There is too much to do.
Capstone. Now we're going to say it one more time. We're going to go even slower. We're going to go as slow as we can. And yes, the point is to make it sound silly.
There is too
Wrong.
to do.
Capstone.
There is too much to do.
Check.
There is too
Capstone.
much to do. There's too much.
Capstone project.
There is too much to do.
I will legitimately say it doesn't. All right. So then the very last activity is, so does it seem so bad anymore? No.
No, because we were just laughing about it, right?
We're laughing
That
about it. And
silliness is powerful.
the active diffusion is about the brain lies to you. And so you have to learn to let stuff go. So really quickly, let me pop back. Oh, we're doing good on time. We got one more lesson. So what I have is, this is where I wanted to kind of talk about the components of ACT, which are the Hexaflex. So on the way, if you ever see the Hexaflex, it always looks like this, and there's a very good reason for it. All the lines link to all the other skills because as we just demonstrated, you use all the different skills. They all inform each other. You use different parts in order to access another component, another skill in that component, or a deeper tool in that component. But the way it is, you've got acceptance, diffusion, and self as context. Those are the mindfulness and acceptance pieces of the Hexaflex. And then contacting the present moment, values, and committed actions. Those are the behavior change components of the Hexaflex. So they are separated into those two different pieces. Just found that in the research the other day as I was digging through my textbooks. And it makes a lot of sense because as I am looking to do some of these things with diffusion, I often find myself contacting present moment and thinking, wait, is this going to bring me closer to my values and farther away, which is what committed actions are. So let me just take a quick second, because you and I know, because we've talked about this a lot in my supervision. Let me kind of just define some of these for anybody who doesn't know what they are, or maybe they've heard about it, but they don't know. So contacting present moment is your meditation. That is literally, you are right here and now. What I say to my students is, you're here in the here and now. You're not thinking about the future. You are not fixated on the past. It is 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can maybe taste. It is present moment. Values are the things that you want. They're not goals, but they're the things that are important to you in that moment and in your life. And yes, your values can change from moment to moment based on where you are. Committed actions are the steps that you take to bring you closer to your values. Acceptance is being okay with the good and the bad. One example that another BCBA I worked with talked about is, she was like, if we found out that in 2 weeks a big meteor is coming our way and it's going to end all life on the earth as we knew it, there's a difference between acceptance and just going to bed and waiting for us to die. Like, acceptance would be, I have to accept that this is going to happen. And then what am I going to do after I get over the fact that this is going to happen? And that's kind of what acceptance does, is it gives you space to do something, I think, once you've gotten over the denial of, I don't want this, I'm not going to accept it, and therefore I'm going to engage in experiential avoidance and do something else. Diffusion is about, again, letting go of your thoughts, understanding your brain lies to you. And then self as context is probably it's the most complex one for me to understand, but I understand it as the noticing you. So you've got your brain, which is, doing all the things, the wonderful things that our brain does, but there is a noticing you. That's the part of you that kind of can sit back and think, is this good? Is this bad? Do I like this? Do I not like this? That's the noticing you. And you are all of those things, right? So self as context is an important part of being able to think about all these pieces of the Hexaflex. So we have one more thing, 35 minutes, doing good. This one, the reason why I wanted to show you the Hexaflex, because this one is, you're going to use all of it. And it's called As Seen on TV. You can see it's day 74. So if we were following these in order, which you don't have to, but if you were following these in order, you have a good month or two that you've been doing this with your guys, or 3. So you definitely have some experience with building these skills. So let's think about this. And I also realize as I'm reading through this that Dr. Dixon is probably my age. And television is different these days. But kids do still experience commercials. They're mostly on YouTube. They're just slightly different than how probably you or I experienced commercials as a young person. So television shows are often interrupted by commercials trying to sell you stuff. Sometimes you're interested in the commercial. Maybe it's for a cool video game that you want, or an advertisement for an event that you're looking forward to going to. However, sometimes they can just be annoying and distract you from the show that you were originally there to watch. Thoughts and emotions can sometimes be like commercials, and they interrupt you from completing your tasks. So think about that concept for a second. When you're doing something, do you ever have thoughts come in that maybe tell you something, or they're trying to sell you something? So have you ever watched a commercial and realized, and obviously we're doing the middle school one, have you realized that they're selling you something other than what it appears to be? The example that I give is, are they selling you this really cool Star Wars toy? But the commercial shows multiple kids playing with the Star Wars toy, and they're all having this really cool interaction. I would argue that is that commercial selling you or showing you the Star Wars toy, or are they selling you the experience of having that amazing playtime with all of those kids who you would imagine are your friends and having a great time with? Which is great. I mean, I'm not lying, though, that's a great thing, but the toy is not that. The toy comes in a box. Friends are not included in the box. So how do emotion commercials, let's think of what an emotion, let's define what an emotion commercial could be. I would argue what I just said, what I described, was an emotion commercial. It was selling this whole experience. But it was saying, if you bought this toy, you're going to have this experience. How might that not be what you're being sold? And that's a really interesting concept to think about, because absolutely, I think real estate shows, and real estate does that all the time. They're masters of it. When you're buying real estate, you're buying a house, but they're selling you a lifestyle. They're selling you, imagine yourself having coffee, looking over this beautiful window on a Saturday morning. So but on the flip side, let's think about, so we were going down, that's discussing. So let's think about this one, the last one over on the third column. So for example, could feeling anger or being upset, which is a very common state for some of my students, really be trying to convince you to avoid doing something, completing the assignment that Ms. Callahan really wants you to do, that's going to teach you more about writing that essay or completing that math problem. So if you're anger, what could that be a commercial? What could that commercial be telling you? Or can you have negative commercials? That's kind of an interesting thought. I'd never really thought about this before reading this particular. Do you have negative? I always think of commercials as these amazing, like they're selling you something, but you could also have a commercial that's trying to scare you. Um, Political ads, we're not quite in political season, but I'm sure next year it's going to be really bad. You get a lot of that, right?
Even those, I think they're car insurance commercials, right? Where the guy, he's got a name, I can never remember what it is.
Mayhem.
Mayhem, thank you. There's always this destruction and disaster and whatever, and things are bad, but hey, we can save you.
Yeah, exactly. Keep you safe from mayhem, like me. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So imagine your feelings and troubling thoughts are commercials. What would they be selling? And how do they try to convince you to buy it? Are they selling you what they say they are?
Hmm.
So, like commercials, troubling thoughts are often larger and way more spectacular than the object that they are selling. So, pick a troubling thought or emotion, and you could draw or describe how your mind tries to sell you that thought. So, in my life, I think about, oh, this is going to be bad. I don't want to. Sunday scaries would be like if I haven't done a really good lesson plan and I don't tire, or it's a new lesson plan, which I'm still a new enough teacher that they're all new to me. But I often will think like, oh, this could be really bad. This is not going to be great. This could go really sideways, and I could end up with some students that are just not happy. I did a lesson on similes and metaphors that I literally stopped the class because they were just, I don't know if you've ever done similes or metaphors with middle schoolers. Just don't. They are just, they're all about, being mean to each other and the number 69. Or that's what she said. But anyway, so yes, I mean, so my commercial could be like, oh, this is going to go so bad. So that's where I need to use my Hexaflex. I need to think, okay, well, how have my values are, I'm going to be teaching this lesson. I'm going to be successful. I'm going to connect with the students. How am I doing that? I've got my committed actions. I've got a really good lesson plan. I'm going to contact present moment. I'm going to make sure that I'm in my best space. But absolutely, my commercial might be sort of different. What about you, Jenny? What kind of commercials do you have?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I live in a neighborhood in California, and we have a homeowners association. Surprise. And so they have board meetings. And if you want to build anything on your property, you have to submit a building packet kind of thing. So I was at this meeting. I just want to put up a carport, and I submitted my paperwork, and I didn't know they were going to discuss it in the meeting. I was just at the meeting to, on Zoom, find out what was happening in my neighborhood once a month. And they say, well, let's discuss building packets. And they say, oh, we have one for Mrs. Nowak over at blah, blah, blah address. And I'm like, okay, yes, you do. And I didn't have it with me, right? Because I gave it to them and then it's on my computer. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And she's like, well, is it this? And I was like, no, right? I'm thinking that's not right. And so now all of a sudden, this scary commercial of, oh my gosh, they're going to deny your whole packet because it's not correct. And so she says, is it for two or for one? And I'm like, it's two, but split second. And see, I am analyzing this after the fact because I did not do well in the meeting. I was like, if I say it's for two, is she going to deny the whole thing? I'm like, let's do one. Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Right. I'm well past 50 something years old. I should be able to stand up and say, you lost the packet. It was for two. And I couldn't. I was like, oh my gosh, what if they deny the whole thing? And then I have zero. I'll at least take one. Right. And now that you're going through this Hexaflex and I'm seeing all the little parts and pieces and all the voices in my head and what I could have done differently, I'm just like, wow. I wouldn't say it was a fail. I would say it was a learning opportunity. And I did get one carport approved. But now next month we got to go back through it again. And I'm just like, So yeah, total commercial derailment. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're like, wait, well, yeah, because you're you're absolutely trying to deal with something unexpected in the moment.
Yep.
Absolutely. So yes, so it's how do our commercials convince us to avoid something?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think it was a bad scenario.
The activity, as you saw, let me go back and I'll share it. You could, yeah, the students would drawing it. You could draw it. You could describe it. I know sometimes, oh, my internet is unstable. I'm so sorry.
You're good.
So yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive one because any of the ones that do all of the Hexaflex really are that way. And it's kind of a big deal. So let's go back. Last slide. We come back to our Hexaflex. We did our 3 lessons. You can kind of see how they all relate to each other, how this would be something that you would literally spend a lifetime learning how to do. But the skills themselves are super valuable. They're valuable whether you're 5 or you're 10 or you're 15 or you're 51. How do you contact present moment? And what I love about it is, so I have 2 young men on the spectrum, 18 and 20, and my daughter who's 21. So I've obviously been in the autism world a long time. And I remember one of the most powerful things I went to, they talked about situational awareness and how powerful situational awareness is and how do you read a room. And if you're working with kids on the spectrum, how in the heck do you teach that? I know I've tried. I've spent longer, going on 2 decades, how to teach situational awareness. And what I love about ACT is this is how you teach it. You teach it in steps. And because if you're able to contact present moment, even as a young adult with autism spectrum disorder, if you're able to be present in the here and now and not fixated on the future or worried about the past, that is the beginnings of how you develop situational awareness, acceptance. I mean, that's when we talk about Navy SEALs, when they are thrown into a combat situation, they are masters of situational awareness. They are masters of acceptance. They are masters of figuring out, okay, what are our values and how do I have my committed actions? I'm accepting the fact that our helicopter is going down. And now what do we do to get out of this situation? It is the definition. So that's an example that's like super extreme, right? That's not what we experience in our classroom, although it sometimes feels like that sometimes. But this is how you do it. And I think that's why I became super excited when I realized it, because it is, but you can see how these are skills that you work on individually, but they work with each other to build psychological flexibility. 5 minutes.
Wow, that was amazing, Gemma.
That was fun.
That was really fun. My hand is still, it's not cold, right? I can feel it and it's not cold, but like I feel like I can feel that it's cold. Is that just kind of crazy?
I really do wonder if that is the lesson of it occurred to me as I'm like, wait a minute, I think that maybe that's kind of the opposite of diffusion, what you should, because it really is. I wouldn't, when I'm going out into the cold, I don't sit there and go, oh my God, it's going to be cold. I go, it's going to take me a second. It's going to suck for the 10. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Cool. But that was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And, my husband and I went through a thing several years back where I didn't know what ACT was. I had heard about it. I mean, this was probably 7, 8 years ago when ACT was out there, but not super big in our behavior analyst field just yet. But I was like, I know this is what we need. And somebody came alongside and walked him through different lessons like this. And so I'm trying to find the books and listen to the lessons or whatever. So even when we didn't know what it was, it still worked. But now that we're looking at it through a 7 dimensions, ABA everything, you do define your behavior. It is technological, right? You just showed us the little activity worksheets that you can do this the same every time you do it or have a jumping off point, right?
And it's going to go, but the thing, and I think that's why ACT is so complex, because it is going to be different for every single student, but that's what life is.
That's what life is, right? And it is conceptually systematic. It uses guided lessons. It uses almost direct instructions, right? It uses reinforcement. It uses all of these great things that we can back up in our ABA research. We could definitely take some data either on am I completing activities or not, or is my brain, are my internal thoughts in a place different before versus afterwards, right? Is my behavior changing? I think that's what you're looking in your capstone project, right? Even though I'm not talking to my students about their behavior, if I teach them these ACT lessons, does their behavior change? Right? I mean, this is just like so ABA. And I know there are people who go, oh, it's psychology or oh, it's whatever. And I think our field as a whole is changing our thought process on that, changing our opinions on that as we see it worked out, as we experience it ourselves, as we get more trainings and understanding out there. And this is great. I'm so glad that you brought this to our group. Love having you around and your trainings that you've been doing. Looking forward to see where you go in the next 3 to 5 years. Going to be
We'll
great.
see.
We will see. Yes, and as always, this is part of our supervision opportunity at Plus One Solutions, that we want you guys not only to be good behavior analysts, we want you to be awesome supervisors, and we want you to be able to disseminate the knowledge that you have through a variety of different training modalities. And so this is one of those where Gemma, as behavior analyst in training, soon to be fully fledged one of us, brought us some knowledge today. And so that was absolutely fantastic. I put a link in the live Zoom Facebook feed, plus1solutions.com. It's got some little hyphens in there. But if you want more information on supervision, please check it out and give us a contact. We would love to talk to you more about it. And we will see you at our next training. Thanks for joining us today.
Bye.
Bye.